I've saved my progress as clippedirises.psd, so called because the irises comprise a series of layers that are all blended together using a clipping mask. Now I'm going to scroll down the list a little bit here to this layer, darker whites. And incidentally, I don't really need this irises layer anymore. These are the old irises. I'm going to get rid of them by clicking on the layer and pressing the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac. That just throws the layer away. Very easy to do. Now I'm going to go to darker whites because notice that the whites of the eyes are hyper illuminated behind the irises. So I need to darken them up, and I did that using this darker whites layer. So again, I went ahead and created a new layer. This time, by the way, I used the lasso tool, actually the polygonal lasso tool, in order to draw a selection outline inside of the black area of the eye. So in other words, right where she's got that mascara. Then I went ahead and used a few commands. Actually, I'll go ahead and draw a shape right here so I can show you what I did. I used a couple of commands under the select menu, then under the modify submenu. I first employed the smooth command, which rounds off the corners, so it does to a selection outline what the median filter does to a layer mask. Goes ahead and rounds off those corners. And then I followed it up with feather, which softens the outlines, it blurs them, and that's analogous to what Gaussian blur does to a layer mask. Anyway, I'll go ahead and escape out of there and press Control D, Command D on the Mac in order to deselect that region. Then I went and grabbed my brush tool. I got a shade of gray, painted inside of those selection outlines, and that's how I arrived at this layer. All right, but to really make it work for us, I'll switch back to the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to go up here to the blend mode pop-up menu and choose the multiply command in order to burn that darkness into the eyes. And we now have much more credible colors for the whites of the eyes because it looks like they're in shadow, which is great, exactly what I want. Now the irises still need some work here. So I'm going to click on that new irises layer. And what we need to do is shade the irises some more, again so they feel more at home inside of these eyes. And that's an ongoing process. You have to keep working it until it starts looking the way you want it to. And at this point, having added these many clipped layers here, I'm now going to switch over to layer effects, because using layer effects you can add things like drop shadows and glows and so on. What I want is an inner glow effect. So I'm going to go down to this little FX icon and I'm going to choose inner glow. And this may seem like a strange idea, especially given that it produces a horrible effect right off the bat there. But that's because I don't want a glow. I want an inner shadow. So I could go up to inner shadow, of course, but that gives you a directional shadow effect. I want an omnidirectional effect, in other words, that's tracing evenly around the entire perimeter of the layer. So I'm going to go with inner glow, and I'm going to change the color. I'll click on that color swatch. I could move my cursor outside the dialog box, in which case I get an eyedropper, and I could click somewhere in order to load that color. And you will see the loaded color here in this new swatch here inside the color picker dialog box. But I'm just going to dial in the color I came up with in advance. 40 for the hue value, H is hue. S is saturation, I'll take that up to 60. And then B is brightness, and I'm going to take that brightness value down to 20 like so. And this will be our inner glow color, so quite dark. Click OK. It doesn't look like anything right now because we need to multiply it into place by changing the blend mode from screen to multiply. So whenever you're doing shadows, you want multiply. You might go with something like linear burn on the rare occasion. Whenever you're doing glows, you try screen, and then if you want more of a glowy effect, you go to linear dodge. It's pretty much the way it's organized. Anyway, I'm going to choose multiply. And then I'm going to increase the size value quite dramatically. I'm going to take that up to 35 pixels like so. And you can now see that inner glow effect at work inside of the iris. This is what the iris looks like without the effect. This is what it looks like with the effect. So it looks much better now. Now I think we've gone too far. So I'm going to take that opacity value right there down to 35%. So we have just a little bit of that inner glow at work, or really that inner shadow. That's not enough, of course, so let's heap on a little more shadow in the form this time of an inner shadow. So if I click on inner shadow, I'm going to add an inner shadow effect. I can even drag it around. Notice that. I can drag that effect directly inside the image window if I want. And quite amazingly, I almost dragged it to exactly the angle I'm looking for. I'm going to take that angle value actually down to -18 degrees. And you know what? I actually probably messed everything up because I have Use Global Light turned on, and that's going to be a big mistake for me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on the Reset button right there in order to restore the original settings. That means I wiped out my previous work, but that's okay. That's better than making a mess of the global light source, because if I change the global light source from 70 degrees to something else, I'm going to mess up some layer effects that are at work on other layers, and I don't want that to happen. All right, so let's go back to Inner Glow. I apologize, going to reestablish things, but sometimes you make mistakes. The best of us make mistakes in Photoshop. All you got to do is take care of them. So 40, 60, 20 for HS&B, click OK. In order to change that value, 35% for opacity. I believe I was using the multiply blend mode, and I took the size value up to 35. So easy to reestablish those settings. Now I'll go to Inner Shadow, and before I make a mess of things, I'll turn off Use Global Light. Now I can do whatever I want without messing up other layers. And I will change this value to negative 18 degrees because that's what I recall working for me. I'm also going to change my inner shadow color. You can see that it's already set to multiply, so that's fine. But I'm going to change the color to 45 for hue, 50 for saturation, and 30 for brightness. This is all based on trial and error on my part and lifting colors using the side dropper. Click OK. I'm going to change my distance value to 19 pixels, and I'm going to increase the size to 35 pixels. So, and now what's happening, you can see, is the shadows coming from this direction. So there's the shadow as cast by a light that's over here, as indicated by this angle value, negative 18 degrees. So it goes this direction. That is the light source is over here, casting a shadow that direction against the light. And because I think I've gone too far with this modification, I'm going to take the opacity value down to 45%. And now, finally, where this exercise is concerned, I want to cast a little bit of a shadow behind the irises. Now, it's not like the irises naturally cast shadows, but there should be a little bit of darkness around them. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on outer glow for this purpose. Click on it. Again, we're getting a glowy effect, which is not what I want. I want a shading effect. So I'm going to dial in a dark color, though this time quite a different value. I'm going to go with a sort of a sea green at 190 degrees for the hue value, 20% for the saturation value, and 40 for that brightness value right there. And you can see we get this kind of dark turquoise. Click OK. Change the blend mode from screen to, as always, for the shading effects, multiply. I'm going to take the opacity value down slightly to 70%, and then I'm going to increase that size value to 16 pixels. And now we can see, take a look at my iris out there in the image window. This is what the iris looks like without that bit of outer glow there. This is what it looks like with the outer glow. Helps to create a more integrated eye effect. And I'll click OK in order to accept that modification. Now, we are not done. I went ahead and added 3 layer effects so far. There are still 2 more that I want to add, and we will do so in the next exercise.